The dark-haired male student confessed that he was not good with erotic stuff, a statement that made the red-haired girl feel like collapsing on her knees. Because she was, in fact, a succubus. A revelation that likely complicated her intentions. A quiet bookstore bustled with patrons browsing various shelves and display tables. Among them was a male student, formally identified as Yui Hayato, 16 years old, who appeared deep in thought. He internally questioned the practice of buying physical how-to books for manga creation, wondering if people still went out of their way for such purchases when countless guides were readily available online. Yui Hayato entered the library, his attention drawn to a particular section of books, prompting an exclamation of surprise as he took in his surroundings. He observed a collection of books with titles such as Etiquette in a Diverse Society, Thinking About LGBT, and Feminism, noting internally that they all possessed good titles. He then mused that a one-shot manga incorporating such new values would likely be better received for manga awards in the current era. He held a specific book titled Etiquette in a Diverse Society, Manners, confirming the subject of his contemplation. A dark-haired boy, standing amidst bookshelves, confides that he has recently developed an interest in a particular girl, just as Yui Hayato calls out to him. Yui then approaches him, offering an apology for any delay she might have caused. The boy quickly reassures her, stating he had not waited at all and had simply left the classroom ahead of time, which Yui acknowledges with relief. His gaze, however, remains subtly intense. As the dark-haired boy continued to observe Yui Hayato, he noted her glamorous presence and overwhelmingly good proportions, even in her uniform, before they prepared to leave together. However, it was then revealed that her true identity was Kato Inu, a succubus, a fact underscored by a document discussing various supernatural beings, including succubi, vampires, and werewolves. Kato Inu suddenly reacted with a startled expression, looking towards the dark-haired boy, as if caught off guard. While the dark-haired boy maintained a serious, contemplative gaze, and Kato Inu began to exclaim, "Why?" Kato Inu, revealing her passionate otaku side, became incredibly excited upon spotting a red pin pop display, eagerly asking for permission to examine it. Her excitement quickly turned into a flurry of action as she debated a specific Akaya color before impulsively deciding to ask the staff for permission to take a picture, leaving the dark-haired boy to ponder her swiftness and why she had asked him to wait. The dark-haired boy reflected on their initial encounter, noting that he and Kato had begun speaking through a strange coincidence. This interaction stemmed from their shared interest in Red Pin, a manga also known as Red Binban. The boy, an aspiring mangaka, appreciated the author's work, while Kato, a dedicated Red Pin otaku and fujoshi, found that his artistic interpretation of the series resonated deeply with her own. Kato Inu expressed her desire to discuss otaku interests with someone who shared her enthusiasm, prompting the dark-haired boy to reflect on their unexpected connection. He considered her to be at the top of the school's social hierarchy, while he was merely middle-tier, making her apparent interest in him surprising, and leading him to internally label her as a succubus despite her outwardly normal appearance. As Kata called out to him, revealing his name as Yui, he was engrossed in a book, which detailed the traditional lore of succubi as alluring demons, but then revealed a disturbing modern interpretation: non-consensual molestation, non-consensual sexual relations. The Reiwa era has established this. Meanwhile, Kato Inu offered a bright smile and a thumbs up, completely unaware of Yui's dark suspicions and recent discovery. Kato Inu reassured Yui that taking pictures was acceptable, to which he responded positively, indicating his agreement. However, Yui's internal thoughts revealed a deeper, more conflicted emotion, as he admitted to himself that he genuinely liked her and desired to pursue a romantic relationship with her. Yet, despite this burgeoning affection, he acknowledged that there were still significant concerns he needed to address before such a relationship could materialize. As he observed Inu meticulously engaged in her otaku activities, contemplating the best way to capture an image, Yui found her unself-conscious dedication and appearance incredibly endearing, further deepening his internal struggle between attraction and caution. The narrative began by highlighting Kato Inu's physical presence, specifically her legs and skirt, which, as Yui observed, drew the gazes of other men like gravity, making her constantly bothered by those only interested in her appearance. Despite her public persona as a pretty cool character at school, Yui internally questioned if her allure was akin to succubus magic. Emu then cheerfully announced that she was finished taking pictures and suggested they go on a store bonus tour, revealing a different, more authentic side of herself that Yui felt she showed only to him, prompting Yui to silently wish that Katu would perceive him as different from all the others. Yui continued to grapple with his feelings for Katu Emu, internally asserting that his attraction stemmed from her personality as an individual, not merely her physical appearance or looks. And he harbored a strong desire to confess his feelings directly, looking her in the eyes as he did so. As Emu walked ahead, her skirt swayed lightly with a soft fuwa sound, causing Yui to blush deeply and widen his eyes, overwhelmed by her proximity and his own intense emotions. Yui's face flushed with a deep blush, his eyes wide in a startled expression, as he reacted internally to his own thoughts and feelings about Katu Emu. Realizing with embarrassment that he must never let her suspect his lustful eyes, despite having previously told her he was not good with that kind of stuff or dirty jokes with friends. The scene then shifted to Yui and Katu Emu inside a store, where Katu asked where they should begin their search. Yui confirmed they were looking at gamers, Toranoana, and Animate, explaining his intention to buy one copy from each, totaling 3, to avoid monopolizing them. Yui reacted with surprise and a hint of dismay upon learning from Emu that there were 6 random types of items, finding the prospect harsh. Emu, smiling brightly, then confessed to Yui that while she typically shopped indifferently by herself, she found today's outing particularly enjoyable because he was with her. Yui's face flushed with a deep blush at Emu's compliment, his eyes wide with a mix of surprise and burgeoning emotion, as he internally affirmed Katu's undeniable attractiveness, irrespective of any supernatural qualities. Yui, still blushing intensely, internally confessed his deep affection for Emu, wishing to spend even more time with her, regardless of how many stores they visited. He resolved to make their bookstore tour a success, viewing it as a dreamlike opportunity to differentiate himself from other boys and, if possible, make Emu reciprocate his feelings. With a determined expression, Yui internally vowed to act in a way that would prevent Emu from ever perceiving him with lustful eyes, implying a desire to be seen as a respectable and protective figure. Meanwhile, Emu and Yui continued their shopping trip, walking through the aisles of the bookstore, seemingly unaware of the intense internal monologue Yui was experiencing. As Yui walked alongside Katu Emu, she internally revealed her true nature, confessing that she has been an unsuccubus-like succubus since childhood. Suddenly, someone called out to Emu, causing her to turn with a surprised expression and respond with a slightly flustered "ah. Yeah," as a group of children on a playground waved goodbye to her. The narrative then clarified the nature of succubi in the Reiwa era, explaining that they are not traditional demons, cannot fly or enter dreams without consent due to established regulations, and possess common mental traits that allow them to live as humans without issue. Emu pondered a thought about people eating udon in Kagawa, while Yui, still grappling with her succubus identity, internally reflected on how other succubi generally embraced romance and constantly thought of erotic things. Emu remained deep in thought, a pensive expression on her face. Meanwhile, Yui continued to rationalize her own nature, telling herself it was acceptable for a succubus not to be interested in such matters, considering it an era of diversity, even as Emu internally acknowledged having recently found someone she liked. The succubus's full name was revealed as Yui Hayato. However, despite her earlier self-convincing, Yui's true, suppressed desires surfaced, as she internally confessed her genuine longing to engage in erotic acts. Yui internally reflected that for the first time since she fell for Emu, she truly understood the feelings of other succubi. Meanwhile, Emu, consumed by her own desires, yearned for Yui to find her cute and erotic, wishing for Yui to be completely crazy about her. But this sudden surge of desire made her question if such feelings were fatal, recalling how soon after they met, she had believed herself to be inept at anything erotic. Further lamenting her lack of romantic experience and her inability to seduce, she pondered that standard pattern of succubus romance, which often involved physical intimacy, and wondered if even in other genres, one-night stands were a common beginning. Overwhelmed by her inexperience and explicit desires, Emu frantically recalled a novel where a physical relationship began after a misunderstanding, desperately wondering how else to start and pleading for someone to teach her about such matters. She observed Yui, who appeared completely normal despite their new relationship, and internally lamented that their outing had not yet presented the opportunity she had hoped for. Emu's self-doubt deepened as she concluded that a succubus might not be a suitable romance target, especially if Yui did not appreciate erotic advances, yet she still yearned for Yui to become conscious of her in some meaningful way. As she walked, Emu's attention was suddenly drawn to stacks of books or magazines displayed on a shelf. As Emu and Yui browsed a bookstore, Emu's gaze fell upon a section dedicated to romantic comedy manga, sparking a sudden idea within her anxious mind. She realized that if she could orchestrate a classic lucky pervert moment from a rom-com, Yui might not discover her true succubus nature. Emu resolved to make the encounter appear entirely coincidental, aiming to make Yui's heart pound and force him to acknowledge her as a girl. Her determination solidified, Emu vowed that no matter what, she would make Yui perceive her as erotic. Katu Emu, walking alongside Yui, began to mentally strategize her lucky pervert moment, immediately considering a panty shot as the primary method. Her thoughts intensified as she realized she was, coincidentally, wearing pretty perverted panties that day. She then pondered if such an accidental reveal would truly be perceived as erotic by an acquaintance, or if awkwardness would prevail, before internally evaluating her own panties' naughty design and high score due to her tail hole, contrasting it with the everyday occurrence of panty showing among succubi. Emu continued to grapple with the practicalities of her plan, wondering how she would even manage to flip it up or make her tail flutter to achieve the desired effect. Katu Emu, still focused on her objective, internally noted that from her current angle, a slight adjustment of her line of sight would allow her to see Yui's panties. Meanwhile, Yui Hayato was overwhelmed by a flurry of conflicting thoughts, questioning whether girls typically wore safety shorts or innerwear, and pondering if succubi held similar values, even recalling a belief that showing panties was a greeting for the Oni tribe. As he ascended the stairs alongside Emu, the temptation grew, and he acknowledged that if he simply tried, he could indeed see. His face betrayed a deep internal struggle, marked by a conflicted expression as he grappled with the burgeoning perverted thoughts. Katu Emu internally registered the success of her lucky pervert operation, expressing surprise that her plan had already yielded results. As Yui Hayato, noticing her skirt, awkwardly apologized and attempted to bring it to her attention, prompting a surprised exclamation from Emu. Before he directly asked if she could wear safety shorts, leaving Emu with a look of utter shock and disbelief. Having complied with Yui's request, Katu Emu informed him that she had properly put on the safety shorts in the toilet, thanking him for waiting. She then apologized, acknowledging her skirt might have been too short and promising to be more careful in the future. Yui, in turn, clarified his concern, explaining he was worried someone might peek from below, but quickly dismissed her apology, stating it was not her fault. He then revealed his deeper feelings, stating he disliked the idea of Kata being looked at with those kinds of eyes by others. Meanwhile, Emu internally lamented her plan as a huge failure, realizing she had completely misjudged the situation, perhaps even recalling the specific petite pants she had acquired for her original scheme. Her wide-eyed expression conveyed a dawning realization of Yui's true, protective intentions. Emu continued to process Yui's words, her mind racing as she wondered if he truly meant he did not want other people to see her panties, desperately wishing for more details about his intentions. She then considered an alternative theory, perhaps he simply disliked anything erotic. Regardless of the exact reason, she found his protective stance to be both gentlemanly and cute. However, she concluded that her panty shot operation plan was now entirely unfeasible, leaving her to ponder what other options remained. Meanwhile, Yui internally congratulated himself, affirming his human rights awareness and declaring himself a sincere man. He believed he had successfully conveyed that looking at someone's underwear without consent was unacceptable in the Reiwa era, and that he absolutely wished to prevent other men from seeing emus, thereby appealing to her that he was different from other guys. With a focused and intense gaze, Yui Hayato prepared himself for their next destination. As Katu Emu excitedly announced their arrival at a specialty store, likely Toranoana, a well-known haven for otaku culture. Yui observed Emu's immediate comfort and lack of hesitation upon entering, internally realizing that she was, in fact, a hardcore otaku. Emu, meanwhile, began her search, noting the store's cluttered layout and musing that the items should ideally be stacked flat, indicating her discerning eye and familiarity with such establishments. Katu Emu, still immersed in the otaku specialty store, critically observed a stack of magazines, noting that they should be displayed flat as she searched for a specific item. Before her eyes sparkled with excitement as she located Red Pin, exclaiming that its cover looked even better in person and that she wanted to examine it more closely. Meanwhile, Yui Hayato stood nearby, seemingly lost in thought, prompting Inu to call his name. As she looked at him with a questioning expression, waving slightly to get his attention. Kato Inu, still holding her magazine, internally pondered a common romantic comedy trope, wondering if she could implement it in the current situation. While Yui Hayato remained lost in thought, speculating on the shelving location of a specific publication, Red Pin, and whether it would be displayed spine out. Inu then called out to Yui, having spotted something, and directed his attention to a particular spot, exclaiming that it was over there. She tapped his shoulder and pointed, asking if what she saw was indeed that, successfully drawing Yui's startled gaze. A soft, yielding pressure, accompanied by a distinct punyan sound effect, made contact with Yui's arm, the source of which was what Inu had excitedly pointed out moments before. At that precise moment, all of Yui Hayato's nerves focused entirely on his left arm, his eyes wide with shock and surprise as he registered the unexpected sensation. His mind raced, interpreting the soft pressure as a profound and mysterious phenomenon, causing him to blush deeply as he pondered the mystery of the human body. Internally, Yui desperately commanded himself to endure the sensation and not let his fluster show on his face, rationalizing that Kato Inu had probably bumped into him accidentally without knowing, and that if he did not pretend it was nothing, he would inadvertently hurt her feelings. Yui Hayato internally reflected on the recent physical contact, believing he had somehow managed to maintain a calm facade despite his intense fluster. Meanwhile, Kato Inu, standing beside him in a bookstore, observed that the manga they were looking at was selling well, noting that quite a few copies were already gone. Inu then pondered if her previous physical contact had been too subtle or if her chest size was lacking, comparing it to the more dramatic depictions of physical contact in manga where boobs are touching. She quickly reassured herself that she was on the larger side, however, before her attention was captured by something else. As she excitedly exclaimed that the manga properly stated it came with a bonus. Kato Inu and Yui Hayato continued their discussion about manga characters, with Inu expressing her desire for her two favorites, Akaya and Soma, to appear, though she would be happy with whoever comes out. When suddenly, both Inu and Yui are startled by an unexpected interjection, their expressions shifting to surprise. A male student with glasses and a ponytail loudly declares his preference for Rokuji, adding that he likes Rokuji too, but Inu reacts with intense surprise and excitement upon hearing the name Soma-kun, while Yui calmly acknowledges the mention of Soma. The unnamed male student, holding a manga volume, confidently declared here, prompting an overwhelming wail from Kato Inu, whose eyes sparkled with intense admiration as she asked if she could take a picture, her mind captivated by his erotic lower eyelashes and crazy expression. Observing Inu's fervent reaction, Yui Hayato calmly interjected, suggesting that rather than taking a picture, a trade might be more appropriate, causing Inu to utter a surprised "eh." Inu, bewildered by Yui's unusual proposition, stammered, questioning the way Yui spoke and if she was truly serious, while Yui internally reasoned that Rokuji's artwork has a harder composition and I want it, revealing her strategic desire for a specific manga. Kato Inu, overwhelmed with emotion, tearfully expressed her profound gratitude to the male student, declaring him her soulmate for sharing the manga. While the male student, observing her intense reaction, internally noted her emotional instability. Later, Yui Hayato, having already purchased her own book, considerately suggested that the male student, now identified as Akaya, could head home first, feeling bad for making him tag along. However, Yui, with a determined thumbs up, affirmed she was free and didn't mind staying, explicitly stating her desire to witness Kato pull Akaya, hinting at a deeper, strategic interest in their interaction. As the trio walked outside, Kato animatedly recounted a surprising scene from the manga that had caused her to get on the wrong train that day, while Akaya listened, his thoughts drifting to high income. As Kato Inu and Akaya walked, their attention was drawn to a large truck displaying an advertisement for Succulina Sakuna part-time jobs, featuring cheerful succubus characters and promising high income, prompting Kato to point out the succubus job. Both Akaya and Kato paused, silently contemplating the implications of such an advertisement. Akaya then voiced his internal musings, wondering aloud what it was like for succubi to be used in advertisements simply because of their nature, to which Kato readily agreed. As the truck drove away, Akaya further elaborated that the Succubus Association actually bans succubi from working in the nightlife or water trade, citing reasons related to succubus human rights and improving their social status, a revelation that surprised Katu. Katu Emu explained that while succubi often liked men, she considered herself different, prompting Akaya to reiterate his concern that such advertisements damaged the succubus social image and were not beneficial. Emu further clarified her perspective, asserting her individuality by stating that before being a succubus, she was simply herself, and thus viewed the ads as merely doing something rather than inherently bad. Akaya expressed his desire for Katu Emu to remain free-spirited and unburdened by conventional expectations, believing that her unique indifference suited her well. Emu, meanwhile, internally noted Akaya's perceived coolness and his image of being admired by girls. Emu, taken aback by his unexpected compliment, processed his words with wide eyes and a hint of surprise. Before shyly offering her thanks, a blush creeping onto her cheeks. As they continued walking, Emu abruptly revealed that despite her outward demeanor, she harbored a complex related to her identity as a succubus, catching Akaya off guard. Akaya, recalling Emu's previous confession, inquired if she was referring to a snaggletooth, to which Emu readily confirmed, and then pointed to her mouth, indicating its exact location. Emu then admitted that she felt embarrassed by it and was always careful to hide it when she smiled, leaving Akaya to silently process her revelation. As they continued walking, Akaya internally acknowledged that teeth alignment indeed significantly influences one's facial expression, making it an important feature. Akaya continued to ponder Emu's revelation about her snaggletooth, deep in thought. Considering whether it was merely a bit pointy and long, or if there was a more significant issue with her overall dental alignment. He ultimately concluded that her alignment was generally good and the snaggletooth wasn't growing unusually, thus not requiring braces. He then internally asserted that there was no need for Emu to worry or feel embarrassed, viewing it as an important quirk unique to her, a sentiment that visibly surprised Emu. Akaya, now flustered, acknowledged that Emu's current cool smile was a deliberate choice to hide her snaggletooth, yet he still found this aspect of her to be good and authentically Katu. Emu, still self-conscious but also intrigued, noted Akaya was truly looking at her, while Akaya, flustered, internally mused on the complex depiction of snaggleteeth in manga. Emu then playfully pressed him to elaborate on what he liked about her, prompting Akaya to continue his internal rambling about the nuances of manga character design, seemingly overwhelmed by his own thoughts. Internally, Akaya began to list the specific qualities he admired about Emu, noting her well-featured face, her steady gaze that met his eyes despite his own darting glances, and the thoughtful pause she took before replying to him. He further appreciated her subtle, secret nod when their eyes met across the classroom, revealing a deeper, unspoken connection he valued. Katu Emu internally acknowledged her growing feelings, admitting to herself that she liked Akaya, and further desired to be seen as special by him, a thought Akaya remained oblivious to as he stood nearby. Suddenly, Akaya urgently cried out Katu's name, warning her to watch out as he reached to pull her away, leaving Katu startled and wide-eyed in shock. Akaya continued to hold Katu Emu's arm, having just pulled her to safety from the path of a passing scooter. He expressed concern, asking if her arm was hurt, to which Emu, still processing the sudden event, thanked him and confirmed she was all right. Internally, Emu admitted her profound surprise at the suddenness of the incident, and noted that her chest was still pounding from the shock. Emu, still processing the recent event, found herself internally comparing Akaya's hands to a man's, noting their strength and the unexpected difference in their heights. Her face flushed as she realized her intense reaction might be visible, her thoughts consumed by the lingering sensation of Akaya's touch. She instinctively clutched her own arm, the physical memory of the contact persisting. The sensation remained vivid, causing her heart to continue racing with a pronounced doki doki beat. A new character, a girl with a confident smile and a paddle, enthusiastically acknowledged the name Tugo. While elsewhere, Katu Emu, still somewhat flustered, discussed her admiration for Tugo with Akaya, admitting she found him and others like him to be jackpots, though Akaya subtly questioned if she truly desired the big jackpot. Emu continued to express her affection for Tugo, finding his intense love for cats endearing, despite her initial negative impression of him, leading to a moment of shared contemplation as both Emu and Akaya exchanged questioning glances, uttering a thoughtful HMMM. Akaya found himself disoriented, his eyes wide with surprise as he began to process his new surroundings, thinking, "This is..." Only to realize he was suddenly crammed into a densely packed train car, prompting him to exclaim internally, "A crowded train." As the train lurched, Akaya stumbled forward, pressing him intimately close to Kato Inu, who let out a small gasp of surprise. He quickly apologized, asking if she was all right, to which she, flustered, confirmed she was fine. Inu's face flushed deeply as she became acutely aware of Akaya's close proximity, her thoughts racing with nervousness about the sudden intimacy. Amidst the crowded train, Kato Inu's nervousness intensified, her mind racing with unspoken thoughts as she found herself in close proximity to Akaya. She internally mused that in the current crush, if her chest were to accidentally touch him, he might not realize it was on purpose, a daring thought that brought a flush to her cheeks. However, immediate self-doubt crept in, as she questioned if such an idea was truly bad, and if he would actually figure out her intentions. Her heart pounded furiously, a sensation so strong she feared its rapid beating might transmit to him, leading her to conclude that her own thoughts were becoming utterly crazy. Kato Inu found herself pressed closely against Akaya, her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and nervousness as the crowded train continued its journey. Akaya, now acutely aware of their close proximity, was overwhelmed by the sensation, internally exclaiming that this situation was not normal and super diamond dash. As he pondered the wonder of the human body, questioning how it was possible to have such a soft part on one's body. And then, attempting to think calmly, he realized that Inu must surely be aware of their contact, despite how female characters in manga often seemed oblivious to such things. Akaya's internal monologue intensified, his face flushed with embarrassment as he desperately tried to endure the close physical contact with Inu, feeling apologetic due to the crowded conditions but also fearing any inappropriate reaction from himself. As the crowded transport reached the first floor, his mind still fixated on the softness of Inu pressed against him. The physical proximity was palpable, and Akaya, overwhelmed, expressed immense relief at the opportunity to finally disembark. Meanwhile, Inu also appeared deeply flustered, her eyes closed and face flushed, silently processing the intense experience. As the train doors began to close, Akaya, having disembarked, turned to Inu and asked if she was all right, acknowledging how packed and chaotic the ride had been. To which Inu, still somewhat dazed, could only manage a quiet "ah yeah." In response. Internally, Akaya was in a state of extreme panic, desperately trying to maintain composure while his mind raced with worries that Inu might perceive his accidental contact during the crowded journey as intentional, urging himself to stay calm and pretend it's nothing. Meanwhile, Inu's own internal monologue was a frantic repetition of "impossible," as she recalled how the contact had suddenly hit a weird spot, causing her to let out a weird voice "ee." Akaya remained silent, his gaze cast downwards, his expression unreadable to an observer. While Inu, still reeling from the accidental contact on the train, internally panicked, convinced that Akaya must now perceive her as a slutty woman and finding the thought utterly embarrassing. However, upon observing his seemingly indifferent demeanor, a wave of relief washed over her as she thought, "Thank goodness. He doesn't seem to care." Yet, this relief quickly morphed into a perplexing confusion, as Inu found herself questioning why she felt a strange disappointment that he did not seem to view her as erotic, leaving her utterly bewildered by her own unexpected feelings. Inu internally reflected on her intense consciousness of Akaya, realizing that this feeling was likely one-sided. She acknowledged Akaya's previous statement about his discomfort with erotic matters, reminding herself of her own nature as a succubus, which made her disappointment understandable. Despite this, Inu resolved to be content with their friendship, vowing to enjoy their shared otaku interests and ensure Akaya did not perceive any shift in her mood. Later, as they walked together, Inu enthusiastically pointed out a manga poster, declaring she was currently reading it, to which Akaya admitted his unfamiliarity and inquired about its content. Inu and Akaya found themselves inside a manga store, likely Animate, where Inu appeared to be searching for something specific, while Akaya considered purchasing an additional copy of a manga titled Red Pin for reference. Inu, meanwhile, felt a surge of nervousness, internally fretting that if her desired item wasn't available there, her efforts would be in vain. Inu remained silent, her expression pensive. As Akaya observed her, internally concluding that Yui was a poor liar, indicating his awareness of her hidden anxieties. Inu, still attempting to maintain her cheerful facade, found herself pondering a deeper, more personal question, whether he would have liked her if she were not a succubus. She quickly tried to shake off the gloomy thoughts, internally vowing to stay cheerful and have fun until the very end. Soon after, Emu and Akaya stood together, each holding a piece of paper, with Akaya internally noting that any non-duplicate acquisition would be a win. Emu then expressed her delight at obtaining Chrono, her third favorite, though she still wished she had acquired Akaya instead, a sentiment Akaya silently observed. Akaya, observing Emu, offered her the opportunity to open his manga as well, remarking that he found watching her unbox hers more interesting. Emu, visibly flustered but with a hint of determination, accepted his offer. Akaya watched her with a somewhat resigned expression, while Emu, still blushing, looked down. Her hands then carefully began to unwrap the package, revealing the contents of the manga. As Emu began to unbox the manga, Akaya inquired if the color indicated it was a duplicate, addressing Soma-kun, while Emu, observing the image, realized the hair color was not red, meaning it was not Akaya. Prompting a sudden exclamation of surprise from her, "Huh! This is," as both she and Akaya reacted with wide-eyed shock and confusion to the contents. The revealed image depicted younger, elementary school versions of Soma and Akaya, causing Emu to exclaim Soma, and identify the other boy as Akaya. Akaya, seemingly pleased and a little bashful, remarked that it was a secret and a really great, awesome picture, while Emu became visibly overwhelmed with embarrassment, sweating profusely and making a distress sound, leading Akaya to ask if she was alright as she hunched over. Katu Emu remained in a state of extreme shock and embarrassment, her face flushed and eyes wide as she exclaimed that the childhood picture of Akaya and Soma was akin to a religious painting. Akaya, observing her intense reaction, found it amusing and slightly embarrassing, laughing as he remarked that anyone, even a succubus like himself, would hesitate in such a situation. Emu continued to be overwhelmed, repeating her sentiment about the religious painting. Still processing the revelation, Emu uttered a confused sound. Akaya, seeing her flustered state, casually offered her the picture, stating that she could have it. Emu, however, still deeply flustered, asked if she could simply take a picture of it instead, expressing her gratitude for having seen it in person. Akaya then playfully suggested that the picture might fetch a good price if sold online, though he quickly dismissed the idea, stating he wouldn't sell it anyway. Emu vehemently refused to take the original, insisting it was a secret and that she absolutely could not accept it. Akaya, with a subtle smile, remarked that the childhood illustration would hold more value if it remained with someone who regarded it with such reverence, like a religious painting. Emu, visibly flustered by his teasing comment, looked up with wide, surprised eyes. As she clutched the folded copy of the picture he had given her, her embarrassment still palpable. Contemplating the image before looking up again, her expression a mix of surprise and lingering mortification. Emu continued to blush deeply, her gaze fixed on the childhood picture as a soft smile graced her lips, still overwhelmed by the memory. While Akaya observed her reaction with a subtle, knowing smile, patiently awaiting her full response. Emu remained momentarily lost in thought, her expression unreadable as she processed the moment. Suddenly, her face lit up with a radiant, fanged smile, and she exclaimed her gratitude, embracing the name Yui with newfound joy. Akaya observed Emu/Yui, his eyes wide with an unstated thought as he processed the scene before him. A subtle tension visible around his neck and collar as his internal feelings began to surface. As Emu/Yui stood before him holding a paper, Akaya found himself thinking how cute she appeared. However, his internal thought accidentally slipped out as a mortified crap, causing both him and Emu/Yui to react with startled exclamations of AH and EH. Emu/Yui remained silent, her expression still one of surprise and growing embarrassment. As a deep blush spread across her face, highlighting her slight snaggletooth amidst the overwhelming fluster. Both Akaya and Emu/Yui stood in an awkward silence, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Before Emu/Yui managed a quiet "thank you very much," to which Akaya replied, "You're welcome," while internally noting his appreciation for her snaggletooth. They then parted ways, the lingering awkwardness evident in their continued silence. The scene transitions to an exterior shot of a residential building, marking a shift in time or location. Meanwhile, Emu/Yui was overwhelmed with intense embarrassment, lamenting her previous reaction and questioning why she had responded with such a formal "thank you very much," when a better reply might have been possible, feeling her metaphorical horns of mortification had popped out. She continued to overthink the interaction, wondering if Akaya was subtly conscious of her, or if his compliment about her snaggletooth was merely a genuine observation, questioning if his words, "he said I was cute," were even real or just an auditory hallucination as she lay in bed. Concurrently, Akaya, with a soft blush, was lost in thought, fondly recalling the sensation of Yui's hand, a memory so vivid he felt it would surely appear in his dreams. Akaya, alone, internally berated himself as an idiot for blurting out that Emu/Yui was cute, despite his genuine belief that she was, lamenting that he had tried to hold back his feelings. He continued to overthink the encounter, wondering if her embarrassment stemmed from him seeing her snaggletooth, or if her reaction implied she didn't entirely dislike his compliment, leaving him utterly unsure of her true feelings. Ultimately, he concluded that, whatever the case, his actions had been regrettable. Akaya internally resolved to endure whatever came next so that he could properly get others to like him, while Emu/Yui, misinterpreting his intentions, decided she would make her actions more erotic the next time. As the profound misunderstanding between these two secretly perverted individuals continued under the night sky,